So often with open source, the way I see it is it's these breadcrumbs that help us, put the puzzle together, right? To paint that bigger picture of what's going on.
Hi, and welcome to the Tech Terror Takedown podcast, where we delve into the latest developments and insights in the field of extremism and terrorism, online safety, and the role online platforms play in that regard. I'm your host, Sophia Rothut, a researcher at LMU Munich and in the EU project TATE. And today we have a very special guest with us who is an expert in open source intelligence, abbreviated with OSINT. I'm very excited that Ritu Gill is joining us today. Ritu is an open source intelligence analyst with over 17 years of experience working in law enforcement. After a 12-year career with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Ritu set up a consulting business providing OSINT training and research to law enforcement and related entities across North America. In 2023, she co-founded Forensic OSINT, which is a screen capture tool for online investigations. Ritu holds a bachelor's degree in criminology and is very actively involved in the OSINT community. Ritu, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Sophia, thanks so much for having me on your podcast, and I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you. Let's dive right in. My first question is a quite fundamental one, I think, but an essential basis and background. To start off, Ritu, can you explain what OSINT is? What does it encompass, and how does it maybe differ from other types of intelligence?
Yeah, for sure. So OSINT stands for Open Source Intelligence. What is open source? It's publicly available content. Some examples of that would be public records, news media, social media, blog sites. What distinguishes it from other ints would be that it is publicly available to everyone. So the accessibility is what makes it different. I also look at it as cost effective than other type of intelligence out there. These are some of those differences that I see.
Moving on to its applications, how is OSINT utilized in law enforcement, especially when it comes to tackling violent extremism and terrorism? What are some of the key benefits that OSINT offers in these contexts?
So OSINT is used in many different industries. Law enforcement uses it to further their investigations. So the way I see it, it's just another tool in their toolbox. They will use OSINT to conduct social media monitoring, to conduct threat assessments. When dealing with violent extremism and terrorism, I think of charities, and in the past, just things I've seen in the news media, and some of the stuff I might have been involved with, but there have been cases where charities were funneling money to terrorist groups overseas. Well, one thing that helps is looking at those registered charities, because you can find out ownership and other details. So that's one way that I see it being used. Another way of looking at how law enforcement uses open source is, for example, think of someone who is a foreign fighter. So say they travel to a place like Syria to fight for a cause. Well, I always wonder, what does their online presence say about them? Also, if you look at their online presence, was it predictable by seeing, how their behavior might have changed over time? I've seen those things in social media and with some of the foreign fighters out there, how over time, their behavior started changing in terms of what they were posting. Maybe they went from not being very religious to all of a sudden posting certain things on their timelines. So those are some of the ways that I've seen it being used.
That sounds very useful indeed. Can you maybe share a story or a case study where OSINT played a crucial role in an investigation or operation? We'd love to hear about a real-world example of its impact.
Yeah, so although I can't specifically mention a case, I can give you like examples. Like one thing I do notice is I've seen like Facebook Marketplace being really helpful in a lot of investigations that I've been involved in because it's helping put two and two together. So all the way from things like someone might be selling a car and you might be able to geolocate it to a certain address because it's parked in front of a location that can be geolocated. So I've seen that where there's instances where someone's selling something online and you can confirm their identity this way as well. I was looking at someone's Facebook profile again through their marketplace. I could confirm that, a certain vehicle that's posted for sale is associated to them. So often with open source, the way I see it is it's these breadcrumbs that help us, put the puzzle together, right? To paint that bigger picture of what's going on. So I see OSINT being used, and it's really important in various investigations and research products. But again, I can talk about OSINT for so long because I've been doing this for so many years. That said, whether it's, if we want to link it back to like something terrorism or extremism related, it's no different because we're looking at somebody's online presence. We're looking at their digital footprint. What footprints have they left online? Sometimes this could be simple as someone changes their online moniker, right? It goes from something that, just their name to something totally different. And you're like, oh, okay, why the change? What does that mean? Does it mean anything, right? Usernames are so important in OSINT and have been for finding where else, someone might be posting.
For those looking to dive into OSINT or enhance their skills, what are some essential techniques and tools that every OSINT practitioner should be familiar with?
That's a great question. So OSINT, I honestly get the question often where people are like, how do I get into it? Tell me about this OSINT thing. OSINT is constantly changing. So keeping up with the changes is really important because although a technique someone tries this week works, it might not work next week. And this is why it becomes so important to keep up with changes. But basic OSINT research, those skills are important. But the way I see it is just as regular targets use the internet, we want to know those basics, right? Of the foundations are important, right? So whether it's Google dorking, using advanced searches, those are important. I always tell people, get the foundations of open source down, right? Your research skills. There's so much that goes into, what foundations look like. I always say this, but critical thinking is always key because anybody can go online and go look at something, but can they critically look at what's in front of them? Not always, right? But that's a skill set of an analyst, that type of practitioner. One thing I do want to mention, because I do talk about all the changes, is kind of a OSINT plug for myself, but I write an OSINT newsletter. Every Friday it goes out, and people can sign up for that. It's at forensicosint.com/newsletter. But that's somewhere, again, it's like a free resource. I spend a lot of time looking at OSINT stuff, so I try to save other people time. I'm delivering this content for free. Go see what's happening in the OSINT world for that week kind of thing. But yeah, just in general, there's many different ways to keep up with content, but I would say getting involved in the OSINT community is huge, but that could be simply, you don't have to engage. You could create an account on some of the social media platforms like X or AKA Twitter, or LinkedIn, and then you want to do searches, #OSINT, maybe see what are people posting, are they posting often? And then maybe go follow those accounts and see if you can learn some things from them.
Finally, let's talk about how hosting service providers and online platform companies can benefit from OSINT. How can these entities use OSINT to mitigate online threats, especially public, violent, extremist, and terrorist content on their platforms?
Yeah, so one thing I look at is I see, the first would be for these platforms to identify if on their platform this stuff is being, distributed or whatnot. I know AI is being used to mitigate some of these threats nowadays, and some sites are blatantly posting and leaving the stuff online. One thing I could mention is a number of years ago, I was doing some research on ISIS, and I found that a lot of their magazines were posted on the Internet Archive, which is also known as the Wayback Machine, which is like one of my top tools I like to use. It was essentially being used as a hosting place for them to hold their content and then share these links among their supporters, because anybody can go create an account there. So that kind of stuff's concerning. Why is that stuff left up there? I don't know. Some of these things I feel like are pretty basic searches and you can find it. So again, I don't know if this is where AI comes in and they can help mitigate, but having some, quality assurance and that kind of stuff, on some of these platforms, I think it's really important that they use that to remove some of this content, right? Because some of this stuff's been sitting there for years and it just stays unless somebody does something about it.
Thank you so much, dear Ritu, for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. I think it's very clear that OSINT plays a vital role in both law enforcement and in helping online platforms address serious threats such as online extremism and terrorism. And I'm very happy that we got to know about the basics and tools of OSINT today. For our listeners, if you want to dive deeper into the world of OSINT, be sure to check out Ritu's website, OSINT Techniques, for a comprehensive overview, information and resources on conducting open source intelligence research. And to stay up to date with the latest news, subscribe to Ritu's weekly OSINT newsletter. Whether you're an investigator, analyst, researcher, or just have a general interest in the potential of open source intelligence, you will find all these incredibly valuable resources in the show notes, of course. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everyone. Goodbye.